Alrighty. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Kristina Boerder, a dedicated professional in the field of marine spatial planning and conservation. Kristina's work involves the analysis of human pressures on the ocean, such as fishing, shipping, and other dynamic stressors. Additionally, Kristina examines the role of environmental and oceanographic parameters and the impacts of climate change to inform and optimize conservation measures. This evening, Kristina will be discussing eelgrass mapping and restoration, a project that's important to Atlantic Canada's blue carbon stores. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Kristina. You can take it away if you'd like.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that sweet introduction. Much appreciated. And thank you to everybody for joining tonight. I'm very aware that I'm competing with such a nice evening outside. And I hope most of you are joining from your decks or gardens. I'm very pleased to be talking about a new or fairly new initiative that we have launched in collaboration between the Dalhousie University's Future of Marine Ecosystems Research Lab and the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, named the Community Eelgrass Restoration Initiative. And I would like to talk to you a bit about the work we're doing around the province with regards to restoring eelgrass and also working to understand it better with regards to where it is and what it is doing and what it means to us living in the province. So really one thing that we are trying to achieve with this project is to push the tides of change with regards to how we are dealing with our environment, especially our marine environment, which is a big topic right now around issues such as the provincial government failing to proclaim the Coastal Protection Act. So really, these kind of topics are on people's minds right now. So, however, it is one thing to hear about it on the news or maybe be aware of it, and completely another to participate actively in conservation efforts and events. And that is really something that we're trying to do, to bring conservation to people and show it can be done on land and it can be done underwater, and it can be a lot of fun at the same time, to inspire really the thought of caring, of stewardship, and to really also show people that protection can be achieved through active participation, and as well as really to establish and strengthen a personal and community connection with these environments, in this case, of course, the coastal environment, to foster stewardship and hopefully long-lasting care. And also, we really, this is a note that has popped up fairly unexpectedly for me, but I mean, I see it with myself, I see it with the students, and I see it with a lot of the participants, is that it's reciprocal in nature with regards to we restore the nature, but we also restore human health. And I will touch on this a little bit later in my talk. So if I say eelgrass, what am I talking about? Eelgrass goes by the scientific name of Zostera marina. It is one of about 72 species of seagrasses worldwide. And seagrasses are indeed the only group of plants in the ocean. So it's not an algae, not like kelp or rockweed or anything you see out there, but this is a proper plant, like the lawn in your yard, for example. It has a root system, it produces flowers and produces pollen and seeds. So it can, that way it can reproduce sexually. The flowers are quite unremarkable. Actually, if I go back one slide, we can see me holding them here out of the water. So they're these tiny little nubs. But yeah, the pollen they produce is plentiful and gets distributed through the water column, through water movements and currents, and then they form seeds and thus spread. But they can also reproduce asexually through growing and cloning themselves. And that led to a pretty wide distribution across pretty much all of the Northern Hemisphere. And seagrass meadows, so in this case not eelgrass, but another seagrass, are thought to be the oldest, or amongst the oldest living organisms, being more than 100,000 year old. I think the oldest bed they currently found, with potential to find even older ones. So I'm obviously biased, but I think eelgrass is the best. So really what I would like to, or what I'm getting at here, is that we benefit from it. So it provides us a whole range of ecosystem services, and or what I like to call benefits, because we're just benefiting from it, we're not being served by it, right? So one thing, starting at the lower bottom of this lower left bottom of this little diagram, is that it hosts a astonishing amount of biodiversity. I would say for Nova Scotia, it's one of the most biodiverse marine ecosystems we have. It provides homes and nursery grounds and spawning grounds to a lot of species that we appreciate, such as lobster, flatfishes, salmon, herring, and a bunch of crabs and other critters that call eelgrass their home. It also improves water quality. It's very efficient in drawing down sediments, and really improves not only quality but also the clarity of the water. By providing a home to all of these species, it directly contributes to economic growth. We have a lot of different fisheries that are worth a lot, such as lobster fishery, that aim for species that at some point in their life cycle rely on eelgrass in one way or another. It also protects our coastlines, which I think in the age of increasing storms and sea level rise is not something to be disregarded lightly. Because it breaks up the energy of the currents and the waves, it can actually significantly reduce the negative effects on the shorelines and slow down erosion. And something that I would like to touch on specifically in this talk is it is also one of these unsung heroes, or I guess we're singing the song in regards to climate change. So it is one of the most active and fastest ecosystems that we have with regards to capturing and sequestering what is called blue carbon. So that refers to all the carbon in the ocean. And I will touch on that in a bit too. And lastly, as I mentioned, also so many species call it their home because it provides excellent habitat to hide, to spawn, to feed, and to raise young. So really, every time we go snorkeling in eelgrass, we find something new, which keeps the work really interesting. So what does it look like? I hope the video plays for you. If you wait a little too long to go snorkeling in the eelgrass, in the lower bottom, you can see a transect line that we're following. And basically the tide is a tad low and you end up with your face right in the eelgrass. You can see it's a jungle. So this is up on the eastern shore. It's a very healthy bed. You can see it's vibrant, it's green, it's dense. And it's like flying over a jungle, really, with regards to the complexity and how you really need to keep your eyes open in order to find anything specific in there. And occasionally when we're looking for specific species, it can be a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack, just this haystack being underwater. So out of this, out of some research and some interests, the Community Eelgrass Restoration Initiative was founded. We're in our second year now. This is a 4-year project funded through the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Fund through DFO, and really is focused on bringing restoration, underwater aquatic restoration, to communities around the province. It is headquartered between the Future of Marine Ecosystems Lab at Dalhousie University, led by Dr. Derek Tenser, aiming to do research to inform solutions to create a more sustainable ocean. In this case, really going directly into restoration. And we are very proud to be partnering with the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq on this project, being a confederacy of the Mainland Mi'kmaq member communities, a tribal council, and the really as the main partners helping us to work with the Mi'kmaq communities around the province. And the guiding principles we are following with this project is, for one, the Nitukulimk a guiding principle, which refers to a respectful and sustainable relationship with the land and its what we call resources. Of course, not only the land, but also our waters, as well as Ituaptumuk, which translates to the two-eyed seeing approach by combining scientific knowledge with the indigenous ways of knowing, and ideally going together on this path and mutually benefiting from these two ways of seeing. And as a scientist coming from a very Western science perspective, I have to say it has been an amazing journey so far to learn and to learn from all the elders we have been privileged to work with, from the community members, and really, kind of look beyond what the science, as I know it, has taught me, and discover these new ways to understand what's around me. So when we talk about CERI, we like to send it around these three buzzwords. So one is we are working community centered, which means that when we do restoration, we do it together with community members, and hopefully thus create a sense of place and connection. We are doing a lot of the work with or all of the work which with regards to being climate smart. So trying to really incorporate climate change as much as possible. It's happening, it's here to stay, and it's only going to increase. And this impacts eelgrass massively around the province. So this is definitely something, in order to make a lasting impact, that we are thinking about a lot. And lastly, as I just mentioned, based on the two-eyed seeing guiding principle, we are knowledge informed, and try to incorporate these different knowledge streams for mutual benefit. So what are we doing, or how does that translate to our actual work? So I would like to first talk about this image because it's one of my favorite. This is actually taken by a drone, and we are standing here in Eelgrass. So this is up on the eastern shore near Owl's Head. And you can see not only is the water very clear, but also just the sheer density. It's like a meadow underwater, and you can see us currently rolling out a transect line and swimming across the meadow. So basically, there's four main parts of our work. One is we want to know where eelgrass is, so we map. There's really something that has surprised us, is that we don't really have a good understanding of where we have eelgrass and how it's doing. So this is really the baseline we're starting with, to better understand where it is and how it is faring over time. The second one would be to measure, so really understand or increase our understanding of the role it plays with regards to being a habitat for biodiversity, but also storing blue carbon. Then the central point, of course, to restore. We hope to be restoring eelgrass sites with at least 10 communities over the 4-year period of the project. And thus, of course, also linking into education and connection. So involve communities and citizen scientists in our work, and do a lot of public outreach, which today is one of these goals. So again, my thanks for giving me this platform. So what does this look like? So on the mapping end of things, we do a lot of in-water and over-water work. So the easiest for us is to fly a drone and really see if we can get good imagery, as in the bottom right corner, that shows us where the ecosystems underwater are, and then try to tell them apart with regards to, this might be rockweed, this is or easier, this is sand, and here is eelgrass, and this is this might be how it changes over time. We also heavily rely on a platform called iNaturalist, and I will be making a plug for you joining the EAC and CERI Eelgrass mapping project later on. The QR code will lead you right to it. With regards to putting the call out for anybody out there who observes eelgrass on the beach or in the water to submit these observations, because that is literally something that directly feeds into our work and helps us find these beds and then decide if we want to study them more. And of course, we also do this to monitor our replanting events. In another note, and this is a bit more tech heavy, we use artificial intelligence to classify a lot of the imagery that we take using drones or photographs in the water. So this is, for example, a part of some work done at the Seascape Ecology and Mapping Lab at Dalhousie University. And we're working partly on underwater photos taken by a group of volunteers kayaking with the Ecology Action Center, and having a GoPro camera attached to the kayak. And with that, we can tell then what is going on, where eelgrass is. And with training this AI, we can then also hopefully automatically detect the density of the plants. So you can see all the students here eagerly looking at the screen, learning how to train the artificial intelligence. On the second point of the measuring, that is really where we go in the water, and we have our next field outing actually tomorrow to do exactly that. We look at biodiversity, so species richness and the composition. We look at the health of the meadows. We study the carbon content at different sites and during different times of the year. How beds are doing with regards to flowering and seed production, what we can see with regards to impacts of climate change, and also how we can basically throw data at this and understand where eelgrass is growing or not. So to touch on some of these projects, so the biodiversity aspect really is a lot of the good old measuring. As you can see, we stick our heads in the water and we take a tape measure and we measure the length, we count the density, and we observe that over time. Then we use something you can see on the right, which are called BRUFs, so baited remote underwater video. And it's basically a modified lobster trap with a stereo video system and a very smelly sardine can at the front that attracts species, and we record them over a 24-hour time frame. We also seine the eelgrass, so this is a small net that gets very carefully dragged across the meadow, and then we see the species that we catch, which is usually a game of which student gets to pick out the angry lobster from the net. And lastly, we use a tool called environmental DNA, which basically consists of taking samples in the eelgrass beds and then analyzing the DNA of the species that shed, for example, scales or any kind of bodily fluids that we can then use to trace their presence. And just to give you an example of what this looks like, so this is just some data over the last couple of years for a bunch of different sites along mostly the eastern shore. So the height and density really depends on where the bed is, but also when you look at it. But it's generally compared to sites that are, or especially countries that have problems or struggling to keep their eelgrass, fairly good for Nova Scotia. And in case you were wondering why eelgrass is called eelgrass, so this is one of our baited underwater videos. You can see a green crab just left the frame, and we have a North American eel approaching the bait and checking it out. So this is actually along the South Shore, and one of the few sites where we observed a lot of eels, especially during the day, which is quite rare. So they are always a great sign of a healthy bed, and of course, also happy about this additional snack. Some more photos from the underwater cameras. These ones were deployed end of last summer, so September. So interesting enough, we found a lot of visitors from the south. In the middle upper, you can see gray triggerfish, below that amberjacks, and also the eels at night feeding on the sardines. So it really gives us an understanding of all the more mobile species that might come in when we're not in the water, because they are shy and are easily scared off. On the point of the environmental DNA, this is something that we are about to kick off on a larger scale because we have a wonderful PhD student focusing on this. This is a new toy that we are very excited about, which is a citizen scientist sampler. So the filters used in this are fairly easy to deploy. Whoever takes the samples pumps a couple of liters of water through that filter, and then can mail the filter to us without the need to freeze it or really do anything fancy to it. And we can then use it to understand which species are present in which sites and during which time frames. That brings me to a big part of the project, which is understanding the role that Nova Scotian meadows have with regards to drawing down carbon. So all the carbon in the ocean and coastal ecosystems is referred to as blue carbon. Of course, it's not blue, it's just the term to describe where it is. And we would like to understand the importance of eelgrass, not only with regards to how much do we have, because we don't know that, but also how does it vary and what does that mean that we have all of this carbon stored in eelgrass with regards to how we treat the eelgrass. So in the little diagram, basically what it shows is that we have different sources how the carbon can get in. It can, for example, come from land, through river runoff, through rain, or already exists in the ocean. And like any other plant on land, eelgrass grows and takes up the carbon in its biomass, so stores it in the leaves. So this is what we call the above ground biomass carbon pool, and that is pretty much like any carbon stored on land, for example, in trees. It is bound as long as the plant is growing, but if the plant dies, it can be released. However, eelgrass is very good in channeling the carbon from above ground into what we call the sedimentary carbon pool, which really is a long-term storage. So it grows higher and higher and higher, and thus pushes the carbon further and further down. So if left undisturbed, eelgrass can properly remove, so sink the carbon in the ground for centuries to millennia. And it will stay there because the decomposition is extremely low of any organic matter, and thus can be considered properly removed from the carbon cycle. And what this looks like and how this can look like with regards to the conversation with the public is nicely shown by some numbers that I would like to throw at you. So seagrasses globally, they need light, so they grow in shallow waters. So it's estimated that only up to 0.1% to 2.2% of the global seafloor area really are covered by seagrasses. But however, they have such high potential that they can remove carbon, for example, about 30 times faster than rainforests. So much more efficient. And so this ecosystem that covers so little of the global seafloor areas has the potential to capture about 18% of the annual carbon within marine ecosystems. So all the carbon that gets caught in the marine environment. And that is because it grows so well. Not many things, especially up here, eat it. And it's very good at capturing particles. And just in case some of you like the numbers, it is thought that globally in seagrasses, so eelgrass and the other 71 species, we have a storage of 4 to about 8 petagrams of organic carbon. I tried to calculate that into something that is more understandable, like, I don't know, like the mass of blue whales or something, but ended up with massive numbers regardless. So you just need to believe me that this is a lot. And as an example, how this can be used for communication, at the right, you can see a little info sheet from the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary in California. They have over 7 square kilometers of eelgrass in this case, and they actually measured that this stores about 75,000 megagrams of carbon. So if this would be destroyed, this would mean adding more than 60,500 passenger vehicles to the roads on average, or burning 31 million gallons of gasoline. And because seagrasses are gifts that keep on giving, they continue to accumulate. Of course, they don't just do it once and then stop. So every year they estimate that just the seagrass in this marine sanctuary removes about an equivalent of 600 passenger vehicles emissions on the road, or more than 200 or around 220,000 gallons of gasoline that will be burned each year. And then, of course, putting a monetary value on it, this might translate into about $140,000 in benefits to society. I personally think this is very low because like things like erosion protection, of course, are really hard to put a dollar value to. But here you can see like how these ecosystem benefits are translated for us to understand. For our areas, we are working on this understanding, and we're looking at, as I mentioned, different sites, and trying to understand how not only these kind of values that are in the literature apply to us, because a lot of those are based on tropical species that have the pleasure of growing year round, whereas our eelgrass has a very short summer growing season. So we know like the carbon storage varies by species, by location, and by season. And so we really go around and try to understand not only where does it grow, but also what does the carbon content look like per site and over the seasons. For example, as you can see in the lower left graph, the green one, of course, carbon content is much higher during the summer months, whereas in the winter, a lot of storms, for example, can resuspend a lot of carbon. So what does it look like for us? As of this year, we have 14 sites. 2 of them we look at every 2 months, which was a lot of fun during the winter time. And then we do a lot of analysis in the lab after we get the what we call the mud cakes. We look at the carbon storage, but also the nitrogen storage. We date the carbon, which means we understand how old it is over depth. And as I mentioned, how it varies over seasons. So this involves, in the first line, a lot of mud, which can be fun, but can also be not that much fun when you get solidly stuck in it. Really timing is of the essence, and some sites are just we just had to give up on because we can't access them because they're just too muddy. But you just need to take my word that the muddier, often the more carbons. So we love to see it regardless. We just don't love to walk in it. To get the samples, we use this coring device, and we go around and make small holes in the eelgrass, and then basically cut the core that you can see here bit by bit in slices to understand how much carbon is there over depth and how quickly it accumulates over time. And we also do that in the winter. So this was something that we got approached on by colleagues in New Brunswick near Miramichi, and they asked us, can we carbon core, or can we take cores to look at carbon in the winter under sea ice? And I had no idea, so I said, like, why not? Let's try it. So we took out a group of students from the New Brunswick Community College. That was my first time walking and driving on sea ice, so that was quite an adventure. And we drilled holes in the ice and then took carbon cores. And what you can't see here in the picture is a balmy minus 12 degrees air temperature, and I think the water was around 0 to 1 degrees. So it was painful to take the gloves off. But we also took some pictures underwater. For a photographer, I had to go into the water, and we were astonished how vibrant and green the eelgrass was even under the sea ice. So that's something we hope to go back next winter. Though right now I don't want to really think about winter. Something we also are working on to understand is how seed germination plays into how our meadows are doing. So here on the right, you can see seeds that we have decayed in a tank so that they would be released from the stalks. And just to give you an idea, one of these little beige or whitish ovals is smaller than a grain of rice. And on the left, you can see one of these seeds sprouting into a little eelgrass plant. So our brave student Lauren just completed her honors on looking at how can we store these seeds after harvesting them, and how can we use that for restoration. If the seeds are in nature naturally distributed, they have about a germination rate of 1 to 5%. So this is fairly low with regards to how many you need. I mean, there's a lot of seeds in a meadow, But for restoration, where like this takes a lot of work to harvest these seeds, we were experimenting what combination of temperature and salinity, which are the two main triggers for seeds to germinate into plants, we need in order to not only store the seeds, but then also to wake them up and make them germinate. And we were able, with a combination of around like 10 degrees temperature and a nice freshwater pulse that shows the seeds are at spring, the sea ice or the ice is melting, that we can replicate that way. We can push the germination rate over 40%, which of course, given the number of seeds we are hoping to deal with, does make a significant difference. And on that note, we are also looking at what it means, like if an area is really muddy or if an area is really sandy, with regards to what type of eelgrass is growing there, what it means for the eelgrass, and how this is benefiting or hindering our restoration efforts. So something that we're trying is, of course, like putting plants in, but also, as I mentioned, using seeds. And how they get into the ground and how they ideally stay in there is, of course, highly dependent on where we are working. As is how we are dealing with the impacts of climate change. So a lot of sites around Nova Scotia are losing eelgrass because the water is getting too warm and the plants are getting stressed out and can't cope with it anymore. So what you see here in the picture is a brand new experiment that we just started 2 weeks ago in the aquatron tank facilities at Dalhousie University, where we have different plants from different populations around Nova Scotia, some from areas that are very cold and currently sitting around 15 degrees versus some from very warm bays that are, when we went in, I think one was at 22 degrees, which was hard to believe. And with these experiments, they're called common garden experiments, we try to trace the genetic responses of these plants to heat stress, to better understand if some populations just can take it better than others and what that means with regards to restoration. And on that note, I would like to talk a bit about the actual replanting, which is at the core of our work. And these photos here were taken at a lovely workshop that was hosted by the Ecology Action Center for several watershed groups in Prince Edward Island. So learning more about like how we can do that around the Maritimes. And really something that's where we started off is like what size fits all. So trying to understand, is there a common method that works best? What with regards to where we deploy it, how we deploy it, and yeah, how it grows back. So we tested 4 different replanting methods. One is using individual seeds, as you can see in one of the photos, using a syringe to inject them into the ground. Then in the bottom photo, you can see, bottom left, you can see the burlap bags. So little burlap bags that we are sewing and filling with local sediment and then seeds and then burrowing them into the ground, as shown on the top right. We also transplant individual shoots, and then the same idea used or tried the transplanting of sods. So that was about 10 by 10 centimeter patches of eelgrass from a donor meadow into the restoration area. So that requires us to first find a healthy bed nearby where we want to plant. In this case, we put different transects in to really compare the different methods. We then had to wait until the seeds were ripe and went out to harvest them. So this was all in 2022. Then got them out of their shells and then planted them the next day and did the same then in repetition with plants. So when we went there last year, first in the spring to check, we went ahead too early because we still were dealing with a spring algal bloom, which had smothered all the eelgrass. So there was not that much left at that point to look at. That is a fairly common observance or occurrence that tends to happen in late spring when like all the sunshine comes back and there's still a lot of nutrients from the winter in the water. The eelgrass can grow back after that very well. So we decided, okay, that's just what it is. We go back a month later And just to find that, that was right after the fires we had last year. And there was just so much runoff coming from the land that they had so much nutrients in it that, yeah, all the eelgrass was smothered. So for this year, we yet have to gather the courage to go back again and check on our testing sites. However, we found out that there's certain methods that just innately work better in the field and work better with people. So with regards to seeds, we really enjoyed the little burlap bag method because it's a lot of fun to play with mud. People love filling these bags. They are easy to use and to bury in the ground. They don't get flushed away, and the green crabs can't get at it right away. So that is really one of our preferred methods. The other one is using shoots, so individual plants, as you can see on the right, with the reddish part being the rhizome, where the roots grow out of, and that is really something that is very easy to do. It's easy for us to extract from the donor meadows without causing too much damage. Taking out the sods just was hard to handle generally and left a noticeable gap in the meadow, which we try to avoid. And it is really easy to like the shoots themselves are really easy to transport, and then when going into the planting, very easy to handle for the community volunteers. Which leads me to the community-led restoration project. So this is our very first event that we hosted last summer with Pictou Landing First Nation, and that was an all-around wonderful event. We had about 1,000 plants that we had collected from a donor meadow nearby, and we had, I think, 25 community members from the age of, just being able to walk to, I think the oldest was 93 years old. And we staked out an area, and then people got to planting, and I think within half an hour we were done because people were much faster. So this year we're looking forward to repeating this with more people and more plants, and hopefully the same amount of fun. And that brings me to the last point, which is educate and connect. So really something that is increasingly obvious to me is that if people have this involvement, the connection goes so much deeper. The understanding is better, and the care, of course, from this. So we do invest a lot of time and effort, not only to do outreach, but also to take people into the water to experience it themselves. So each year we are proud to be participating in an annual ocean camp with the Alnoweg Education Center, where we take Indigenous youth snorkeling to discover and see this ecosystem under the waves themselves. We also do pool sessions. We take all kinds of community members, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, whatever we can do that makes it fun and takes people on an exploratory journey that enables us to talk about eelgrass. And so that has been a great journey so far, and really something that we internally dubbed like Youth for the Future of Eelgrass. So mostly hosted by our wonderful coordinator Taylor. In the right picture, the lady with the curls in the red sweater. So she's very great in engaging youth, and has come up with eelgrass games around the life cycle of eelgrass, and just like get kids involved and understand share the understanding and joy of this work, and also hopefully train scientists to be, who knows. And on that note, and to wrap up on really this restoring connection, this is, as I mentioned initially, something I personally had not had on my radar at all with regards to, and of course was aware that that's important to involve people, but I'm a biologist. I work with biology. I don't work with people to a certain degree. So having people involved in the projects, from the project members and the staff to the students to the community members, and giving feedback, a lot that comes out is that they feel personal well-being increased. A lot of people say like that there's a lot of negative news, and like being able to do something, no matter how small, is helpful for them to not only feel better, but also be better able to cope with regards to mental health. And this empowerment through conservation really is something that's popping up again and again with regards to involving local community members and them feeling like that fosters not only their interests, but also enthusiasm, stewardship, and dialogue around environmental issues, which is now more needed than ever. And this hands-on experience in the water can really act as a catalyst for education and also a further engagement. So just a little quote I pulled from a publication on this is the connection to nature heightened and extended by learning about ecology and conservation. And also often, as I said, reported that has a positive impact on the mental health of participants, saying like, of course, we make it clear that this project is not going to solve climate change or a biodiversity crisis or anything, but it, I think, is can be seen as sowing a seed, very much that is hopefully primed as we do in our work with regards to involving people and having them care and exchange the knowledge and a enthusiasm for this on different kinds of levels. And personally, for me, something that I really learned is that community-based restoration is incredibly rewarding, even if it's not always scientifically optimal with regards to having to make compromises between like what works and what doesn't. With regards to bringing people in and doing it hands-on might not always be the perfect solution, but it's definitely worth it. So, if you now would like to know or curious what you can do with regards to eelgrass work, this is my little call for support. We are officially launching the project. That's just something to do that had to do with like funding and such in the next couple of weeks. And we are reaching out to the public to help us with regards to being our eyes and ears on the ground, because we can't be everywhere at the same time, no matter how much I try. So if you see eelgrass, please consider to submit your observations to either the iNaturalist project, again, the QR code leads you right there, or directly to us at eelgrass.ca. We have a little form on the website, or by email, no matter what. Also, if you are a coastal property owner and want to support this kind of work, maybe you have eelgrass in front of your property, please do feel free to reach out. This is really something with so much of Nova Scotia's coastline being privately owned, we are struggling massively with is accessing the coastline and having a safe access point to go back to and access the eelgrass in the water, and also maybe over time, and having someone there who keeps an eye on it really helps us. And if you are a community member and want to think like, oh yeah, that would be something, we have eelgrass here, or we had eelgrass and has disappeared, and this would be something for our community, please contact us. We are always looking for these kind of connections. As said, like, this is community led, so we don't want to be the ones coming and saying like you should do that, but quite the other way around. And if you want to follow us on social media, we are in Instagram and on Facebook. And otherwise, I would like to close by thanking all our partners and supporters. They are many and they are all amazing. And that is it from my end. Here's my contact information. And yeah, I thank you very much for your attention on this beautiful evening.
Thank you so much, Kristina. That was amazing. I love the project. And even though eelgrass does cover a very small portion of the ocean, I feel like it's a very interactive project, and you're right, it gets people involved and interested, and then it kind of goes from there, and people become overall more interested and take environmental initiatives.
It's certainly, we call it amongst ourselves the gateway drug for coastal restoration, because it's like we also are lucky that we have an amazing photographer, Nicholas Winkler, who like takes these amazing pictures that are easy to get people enthusiastic about.
Yes, that definitely helps. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or write them in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the human-caused threats to these restoration projects and to the eelgrass beds in general?
Yes, of
What
course.
sorts of things are we doing that are negatively impacting those efforts?
Yes. Very good point. As you notice, I did not put that in the presentation because a lot of these is not something we can directly address. But some of these points are certainly important to touch on. So there's a multitude of stressors that eelgrass here in Nova Scotia is exposed to. The primary one really being the human impacts. So they can range from direct impacts such as coastal construction, shoreline hardening, changing of runoff, these kind of things, use of fertilizer, so eutrophication, too much nutrients in the water, to direct impacts from anchoring and boating. Aquaculture can have an impact, and then we're seeing a lot of issues, of course, caused, as I mentioned, caused by climate change with regards to warming waters, as well as the introduction of new diseases and also invasive species. The European green crab being the biggest culprit right now. So yeah, it's a lot of different stresses coming from a lot of different angles, and often it's hard for us to understand what impacts a site that has lost eelgrass, and making our life a little harder to find spots that are really suitable, so that we know when we replant it will also really grow. So we tend to prioritize sites where we see a bit of natural regrowth, but because of these stresses, it's just not enough to form a closed meadow, which makes the eelgrass much more resilient to these stressors. And personally, from what I've seen, so far, the most damage that we've seen over the last couple of years were storms. Because of the increased, because the eelgrass is weakened to start with, and because of increased intensity and frequency of the storms, a lot of eelgrass beds get taken out completely by, like, for example, Dorian did quite a number, and Fiona on the Northumberland shore. So yeah, this is a lot of these things that we have to take into account when going out to restore. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
We do have a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but I can read it. You mentioned that the eelgrass have rhizomes. Is there an advantage of propagating them from seed?
Yes, there is. So because seeds mean it's has been a sexual reproduction, of course the gene mixing has occurred, whereas from rhizome this would be clones. So you get a better genetic diversity using seeds, and also in contrast to the plants, they can like be put in little bags and then thrown off boats. So with regards to the amount of seeds used in these trials, so last year we had 25,000 seeds in our first trial. This year we hope to go over 100,000 seeds. Just to give you a perspective, other groups who are like much more advanced on seagrass restoration are using well over 1 million seeds. So the reach and the spread of that is just a lot more a lot wider and a lot less labor intense than using adult plants. But of course, it takes a while for the seeds to sprout and then take root. So the gain from it is much lower. So it's a bit of yeah, where you are, what you want to do, and how you want to involve the people, and also with regards to the technology you have at hand to adequately keep the seeds and then germinate them. Yes, Bob, good to see you.
I can see you a little better, I think, Kristina.
Or hear from you.
Well, I suppose I could do something here, but Anyway,
Hey.
I attended two aquaculture review board meetings about Palmgate Harbor last spring and then in the fall. And I was really frightened by the fact that none of the science seemed to matter. There was a concern about eelgrass and shading from this new technology that this person is trying to put on. There were basically piping plover nesting on the beach far too close. They ignored what the Canadian Wildlife Service said. I just wondered if you've had any cooperation from them over where these sites are going in terms of the eelgrass beds.
Who do you mean them?
Yeah, the Aquaculture Review Board is a group of
Mhm,
citizens that
Okay.
that decide, and of course DFO and inland and the provincial Department of Fisheries have representation on it. But I was appalled at the way it operated. I won't get into detail now because it's not the time or place, but like the precautionary principle with some of these sites should extend to eelgrass beds, I would think.
It is one of the big concerns, and certainly something where we do keep an eye on. This is, I think, like exactly the point why we try to work with communities. Is we have a hard time keeping up with all of these things that are happening, and often they are local. It's not necessarily our place to sweep in and talk about that, but like having the community members there and being informed and caring and having that stewardship over the area, that is really where we hope these kind of discussions can be more informed and more aware with regards to, hey, wait a second, what about the eelgrass in the area? Have we considered that, and if so, why not?
Yeah, and
But yeah, it's an excellent example.
that's what was raised. We raised that issue and a number of other issues, and they just ignored it. Anyway, thank you
Sorry
very
to
much. I was hoping that they'd be doing better.
Who knows? Maybe in the future. All right. Lindsay, yes.
Happier question this time. I know when we were working on the Owl's Head campaign, I was shocked at how many other countries and jurisdictions were undergoing eelgrass bed restorations and seagrass bed restoration efforts. And it seemed like it hadn't really caught on here at this time or at that time. And do you feel like the perceptions are changing about these efforts, not just replanting, but protecting them in the first place? And is there anything that we can learn aside from the scientific point of view from other countries that have undergone such projects?
Very good question. We actually just got back a couple of weeks ago from a very informative trip to the UK to look at the restoration being done there. The UK having lost more than 90% of their seagrass and spending a lot of time and effort and money into trying to get them back, which I guess is in itself the first lesson that, like, cherish it while you have it. If it's gone, it's gonna be tricky to restore. And yeah, so generally, the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands, France, the US, and Australia are like on the forefront of restoration, where there's a lot of data on also the losses that is creating a good momentum. For us here, it's more like we're still in the lucky position that we still have a lot of eelgrass, but we know we are losing it. We don't know to what rate, and often, as I mentioned, we don't know why. So that is why we like decided to be so heavily community focused, is that through the work and through bringing people in, and I shamelessly admit sometimes we lure people in with a barbecue and stand-up paddleboarding or other things, just because it's meant to be a fun thing too, that people as soon as they see it's possible, and they start to care. And we had a lot of people who or we have occasionally have people come in and say like, yeah, I mean, it's the green stuff, it just grows back, right? And we're just like, okay, no, this is not how it works. And then there's interesting discussions around like what it means for people from all kinds of sectors. And um, I think talking about it, like less than half of all Nova Scotians, in my experience, have even heard of eelgrass. And when you start to talk about it and share the love and speak about like how important it is and all the benefits it gives us, people start to be interested. And then they call me back or send me messages or emails saying like with photos from snapshot on the eelgrass on the beach, saying like, hey, look, I found eelgrass on the beach. And or we went snorkeling with the kids. And that extends to all kinds of other things, of course. So as I mentioned, it's a bit of a gateway drug ecosystem to hopefully caring more about things such as shoreline, how we treat our shorelines, what water quality issues mean, responsible boating, all of these kind of issues. So while there's a certainly international lessons to be learned, I have to say it's also very place specific. And I feel Nova Scotia is just starting to realize the value of nature and healthy and intact ecosystems, and seeing that become more and more a part of the public discourse, but also that people step up more and more is wonderful. And I think a lot of the recent campaigns, one being the Owl's Head campaign, has really taught us a lot about that.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Otherwise, feel free to message me anytime if there's questions popping up.
I have a quick question. What are the hopes for the future for the project? I mean, I think you said you're in the second year and it's a 4-year project. Is there any specific goals that you really want to hit?
Well, of course, we try to restore as much area as possible with as many communities, do as much outreach as we can. 10 communities would be wonderful. We did one last year. We're doing 5 this year, so it's already going faster than we had expected. So yeah, and then hopefully finding ways to continue the project. I mean, we're lucky to be working with an amazing set of partners, and it has mission creep has been one of the core elements of this, that a lot of different offshoot projects have grown from this. And who knows what becomes of all of these. So but ideally, yes, we would love to keep that going, because I think we're building something good. And there's a lot of interest from all levels, so I think it's the right kind of project at the right kind of time.
That's great. Thank you. Alrighty, I think it's nearing to the end. It's almost 8. So I just want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you so much, Kristina, for being here tonight. We all really appreciate you taking your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a wonderful way to spend the evening.
Yes. Thank you.
You have a good one.
Hope everyone
Bye-bye.
has a good night. Good night, everyone.